For thousands of years, humans have been trying to understand one of the biggest mysteries, the human mind. Why do we think the way we think? What makes us feel the way we feel? How come we behave the way we do? And perhaps the biggest question, why are we so good at fixing everyone else's problems when we can't even figure out our own? Long before psychologists, we had philosophers. More than 2,000 years ago, Socrates was already asking questions about human nature, our beliefs, and how we think. But as humans tried to understand the mind, we came up with some interesting explanations along the way. Take phrenology. People believed the bumps on your skull could reveal everything from your personality to your intelligence. It became incredibly popular, and it was incredibly wrong. By the late 1800s, doctors were using hypnosis to study and treat what was then called hysteria, a diagnosis that became disproportionately associated with women. And around this time, one of the most famous names in psychology entered the picture: Sigmund Freud. Freud was a physician trained in neurology. He went on to develop psychoanalysis and put enormous emphasis on the unconscious, childhood, dreams, defense mechanisms, and famously, sex. A lot of his theories haven't held up scientifically, but Freud changed the way people thought about the mind. The idea that the things outside our conscious awareness could influence our behavior became enormously influential. Two people associated with Freud, Alfred Adler and Carl Jung, they eventually broke away and developed major theories of their own. Adler focused on inferiority, striving for superiority, and even birth order, while Jung explored ideas like the collective unconscious, introversion, and extroversion. Then came one of psychology's most recognizable images, the Rorschach inkblot test. You look at an ambiguous image and say what you see. The idea was that your interpretation might reveal something about how you perceive and experience the world. But eventually, psychology started moving in a very different direction. Behaviorists said, enough talking about the things that we can't directly observe. Let's study what people actually do. The focus was on learning, rewards, punishment, and conditioning. Basically, humans became very complicated lab rats. And speaking of animals, Ivan Pavlov famously got dogs to associate sound with food until the sound itself could trigger salivation. Psych 101. Except Pavlov wasn't a psychologist, he was a physiologist studying digestion. Behaviorism became incredibly influential, but eventually psychologists ran into a slight problem. Humans actually think. We remember, we interpret, we have beliefs, we make decisions. Apparently, ignoring the mind while studying psychology was becoming somewhat inconvenient. So the mind came back. Cognitive psychology blew up, focusing on memory, attention, beliefs, and how we interpret the world. Those ideas helped shape modern therapies like CBT, which looks at the relationship between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. At the same time, humanistic psychology focused more on growth and the person behind the symptoms. Carl Rogers emphasized empathy, authenticity, and actually listening to the person sitting in front of you. What a wild concept. Abraham Maslow gave us the hierarchy of needs. You know, the pyramid, except Maslow didn't actually create the famous pyramid. This came later. Apparently his theory needed better branding. By this point, psychology had expanded in almost every direction. Social psychologists studied how other people and situations influence us. In Stanley Milgram's famous experiment, participants administered what they believed were increasingly dangerous electric shocks because an authority figure told them to do so. The shocks, they weren't real. The participants thought they were. Evolutionary psychology asked how our evolutionary history might still influence modern behavior today. And neuroscience gave researchers something philosophers could only dream about: the ability to actually study the living brain. Brain imaging, genetics, cognition, behavior. Psychology was becoming increasingly connected to biology and neuroscience. mental health diagnosis became more standardized with systems like the DSM creating shared criteria for diagnosing mental disorders. And then something else happened. Psychology started leaving universities, laboratories, and therapy offices and entering everyday culture. Mindfulness, attachment styles, positive psychology, self-help coaching, Tony Robbins filling arenas with loud music, YouTube, podcasts, Instagram, and even TikTok, where someone with a camera and fancy lighting can explain your entire childhood in 30 seconds. Suddenly, everyone's a narcissist. Your ex has an avoidant attachment style, and your boss is definitely gaslighting you. And perhaps your attachment style explains every relationship you've had since kindergarten. It's easy to make fun of, and sometimes it deserves it, but something important has happened too. Psychological information became more accessible than ever. People started openly talking about boundaries, trauma, attachment, emotion regulation, anxiety, and mental health in ways that previous generations often didn't. The COVID pandemic in 2020 accelerated this with greater access to online therapy than ever before. It became easier than ever to access an abundance of information through social media and recently artificial intelligence. That's progress, but access to psychology isn't the same thing as understanding it. Because if the history of psychology teaches us anything, it's that our explanations of the human mind keep changing. We once looked at the bumps on our skulls, then the unconscious, then behavior, then thoughts, then the brain, and each step taught us something new. More than 2,000 years ago, philosophers were trying to understand why humans think, feel, and behave. Today, we can literally look inside of the living brain, and somehow we're still trying to figure out ourselves. Maybe that's the real evolution of psychology. Not that we finally figured out the human mind, we just got better understanding how complicated it really is. So the next time someone on TikTok tells you how they figured it all out in 30 seconds, maybe keep scrolling.